At this point in time, we have not yet considered what happens when an economy grows, or what growth would look like for the simple two-good economy we've been investigating so far. It turns out that the Ppf is a nice model for illustrating what happens when an economy expands. And by expand we mean that the economy can now produce more goods and services within the same amount of time. Another way of describing economic growth is by defining it as an increase in the living standards of an economy's population, which is usually linked to being able to produce more. Underdeveloped countries such as Angola or Rwanda are not able to produce as much as developed countries such as Australia or Switzerland. And the more developed an economy is, the more it can produce, and so the more its population can consume. It is therefore important to monitor economic growth and understand what leads to such growth. So let's briefly discuss what some of the underlying causes of economic growth are. For now, we'll cover the basics. There's actually an entire field in economics devoted to growth. One of the first key factors contributing to economic growth is an increase in productive resources, or as some say, productive assets. This could be an increase in the labor force due to population growth, or an increase in the amount of productive resources now available for use, such as machinery or buildings. The second key source of economic growth is improvements in technology. Faster computers, mobile technology, energy-efficient motors, and so forth allow us to produce more with the same amount of resources. So an increase in productive resources or improvements in technology allow an economy to expand and therefore its population to benefit from more or better consumption. The Ppf model or graph allows us to investigate economic growth and some of its more interesting consequences. But before we do that, I want to highlight an important issue around production itself and economic growth. In our simple economy, we said that only two goods could be produced, tons of wheat or kilometers of power lines. But these two goods serve very different and important purposes. Wheat is a consumption or consumer good. Once eaten, it no longer has any benefit and is not part of any production process. Power lines, on the other hand, will continue to distribute electricity once built, and electricity is an important input into manufacturing and other industrial and commercial activities. So although both goods are important, wheat is consumed while power lines remain for a longer time and help increase productivity, allowing an economy to now produce more in the future. So power lines increase the amount of goods and services that an economy can produce, therefore supporting economic growth. Goods such as railroads, airports, water, electricity, oil, or faster internet are all goods which increase production capacity. Goods such as restaurant food, movies, fashion, music, haircuts, or even household appliances are considered consumption or consumer goods, which do not increase future production. Both consumption goods and productive goods are important. Consumption goods improve our standards of living, while productive goods allow us to produce more in the future, also leading to an increase in living standards. The point I'm trying to make is that the more productive goods an economy produces, such as power lines, the higher the future output will be. Before we investigate an increase in productive capital, let's investigate, using our Ppf model, what impact an improvement in technology will have on our economy. Figure A illustrates our basic economy and the line labeled ppft the original Ppf curve. Let's assume point K represents the allocative efficient point for this economy, and that due to improvements in crop technology, farmers are able to produce more wheat given the same amount of land, labor, and time. To represent this increase in productivity, we need a new Ppf line, which contains new and larger production efficient combinations. This is illustrated by line Ppf t plus 1, representing one period further into the future. Notice how the new Ppf line is not equally distant from the original Ppf line ppt. This is because only wheat production is improved due to the improvement in crop yields. The technology used for power line production remains the same. This relative increase in productivity can be seen by looking at the maximum output levels for each good. If all productive resources are used in the production of wheat, our simple economy can produce 50 tons of wheat, which is 20 more tons than what was possible using old crop yield technology. But the maximum amount of power lines that can be produced stays the same at 30 kilometers. If the economy experienced an improvement in the technology used to produce power lines, we would see an increase in the maximum amount of power lines that can be produced and no increase in the amount of wheat. If we assume that point K was the allocative efficient production point, we now can easily see that this is no longer the case. In fact, point K now lies within the ppf, which tells us it's not even production efficient. The economy can now produce more wheat, for instance at point L, without having to reduce the amount of power lines produced. We can continue producing 20 kilometers of power lines per year while increasing our wheat production from 17 tons to 29 tons. However, the improvement in the production of wheat does not mean the economy will use all of this improvement just for the production of wheat. In other words, the improvement in wheat crop yield does not imply that the production of power lines will remain fixed at 20 kilometers and that point L is the allocative efficient point. Because the improvement in wheat production allows us to produce more wheat with the same amount of productive resources, it means we can use less resources to produce the same amount of wheat and shift the remaining resources away from wheat production and towards power line manufacturing. This reallocation of productive resources can be illustrated by point M. At point M, any resources that were left idle because of improvements in wheat production without an increase in wheat production are now used to produce power lines. The new allocative efficient point will need to be determined by comparing the economy's new marginal benefit and cost values. If, say, there was an increase in productivity which impacted all sectors of an economy, like what mobile technology or computer chips provided, then we should expect our economy to be able to produce more of both goods. In that case, the ppf line will shift equally outwards, and again a new allocative efficient point will need to be determined based on marginal costs and marginal benefits. All in all, any point on the new ppf line represents a production combination equal or greater than the original ppf line, which is an indication of economic growth.